Here's another one of those truths that can change the way people heal, perform, lead, parent, relate, live. And it's this: you do not need more judgment, you need right perception. I want to start there because I think a lot of people have been trying to grow and improve and even heal through the wrong method. They think judgment is helping. They think if they stay hard on themselves, they'll stay sharp. If they criticize themselves enough, they'll finally change. If they shame themselves enough, they'll stop repeating the pattern. If they mentally point out everything wrong fast enough, they'll become better and stronger, wiser, more disciplined, more evolved. But I really do not think that is what is happening. I think a lot of people are not correcting themselves. I think they are condemning themselves. And those are not the same thing. So, the first light bulb moment I'd like for you to have, because correction is clean, correction is useful, correction is clear, correction says, let me see what is happening accurately so I can respond in a way that helps. Condemnation is different. Condemnation attacks, condemnation personalizes, condemnation exaggerates, condemnation turns one moment into a verdict. Condemnation makes the struggle feel like identity. And condemnation says, this is what you are. This is what this means. This proves something bad about you. Once that happens, the person is no longer seeing clearly. They are seeing through fear. They're seeing through shame. They're seeing through old identity. They're seeing through ego. They're seeing through pain. And when perception is distorted, everything gets heavier. And that is why this matters so much, because I think many people are not only struggling with what happened, they're struggling with how they are seeing what happened. And that is huge. Person has one hard moment and instantly turns it into something bigger. One bad day becomes I'm falling apart. One off plan meal becomes I always do this. One mistake at work becomes I'm not good enough. Hard conversation becomes I ruin relationships. One miss in performance becomes I choke under pressure. One wave of anxiety becomes something is wrong with me. And now they are no longer responding to reality. They are responding to the distorted meaning attached to reality. That is where so much suffering grows. And I think this is why so many people stay trapped inside the same patterns for so long, because they do not just feel something, they judge it. They do not just notice something, they condemn it. They do not just see what needs attention, they turn it into an argument against themselves. And then they wonder why they still feel stuck, because judgment does not heal what right perception would have healed. That is the deeper truth. I think this shows up everywhere. It shows up in stress. People think they are just overwhelmed by life. And sometimes life is a lot. Absolutely. But often part of what is making the stress so intense is not just the circumstances, it is the interpretation. The mind says, this is too much. I cannot handle this. I'm behind. This means I'm failing. Everything is on me. If I don't hold this together perfectly, it all falls apart. That is not neutral perception. That is a mind under fear, assigning heavy meaning very quickly. And once that happens, the body starts living inside that interpretation. The nervous system responds to what the mind is saying, and that matters because it shows up in health and weight loss. And a person has one craving, one slip, one day they do not do what they said they wanted to do, and instantly the mind says, see, I have no discipline. I never change. I ruin everything. I always go backwards. This is just who I am. That is not correction. That is condemnation. Correction would say, okay, what happened here? What triggered this? What pattern is showing up? What would support me better next time? That is useful. That is clear. That can heal. But shame just deepens the emotional charge. It shows up in relationships too. Somebody says something in a tone you do not like. Somebody gets quiet. Somebody forgets something. Somebody disappoints you. And the mind instantly assigns meaning. They do not care. I am too much. I am not enough. I always get hurt. I should shut down. I need to defend myself. This proves I cannot trust people. And again, the issue is not only what happened, it is what was perceived through fear and pain, ego, or old wounding. And it shows up massively in performance. Athletes, golfers, shooters, high achievers, leaders, people under pressure, they often believe that judgment is helping them. They think, if I'm hard on myself, I'll stay sharp. If I criticize myself quickly, I'll fix it. If I mentally punish the mistake, I won't repeat it. If I keep pressure on myself, I'll stay driven. But what really happens? The mind gets tighter, the body gets tighter, the person becomes less free, less intuitive, less connected, less clear, less available to flow, less available to the zone, less available to higher self, higher power, deeper intelligence, wiser action. Because judgment is not a clean state, it is an interfering state. And one of the things I feel very strongly about is that many people have been taught to confuse self attack with self awareness. Those are not the same thing. Self awareness, that condones, self attack condemns. Self awareness says, I see the pattern. Self attack says, I am the pattern. Self awareness says, something needs attention here. Self attack says, something is wrong with me. Self awareness gives you information, self attack gives you distortion. And that distinction changes everything because many people are walking around thinking they are working on themselves when really they are wounding themselves with a more sophisticated vocabulary. They think because they are analyzing themselves, they are being wise. Because they are being brutally honest, they are being mature. Because they are hard on themselves, they are being accountable. But the fruit tells the truth. That is one of the most important things I can say this week. The fruit tells the truth. What is the fruit of the way you are seeing this? Does it create clarity, peace, truth, responsibility, clean action, freedom, healing, connection, wisdom? Or does it create shame, tightness, collapse, defensiveness, hopelessness, distortion, identity pain, fear, self protection, more separation from your higher self? Because not every harsh thought is wise. Not every intense thought is accurate. Not every self critical thought is responsible. Sometimes it is just fear using your voice. Now that is deep, right? Sometimes it is old conditioning using your voice. Sometimes it is an old wound interpreting the moment. Sometimes it is ego trying to protect itself through attack. Sometimes it is pain trying to stay in charge. Sometimes it is a younger pattern still deciding what things mean. And that is why I think this week is so powerful because it invites people into something deeper than be positive. This is not about positivity. This is about perception. It's about asking, am I seeing this clearly? Or am I seeing this through fear? That question can free people because fear is fast. Fear is dramatic. Fear is reactive. Fear assigns meaning quickly. Fear turns moments into identity. Fear says everything is urgent, dangerous, personal, and final. Right perception does work or does not work like that. Right perception is clearer. It is slower. It sees more accurately. It does not need to exaggerate. It does not need to condemn. It does not need to make one moment mean everything. Right perception can say, this matters, but is not my identity. This hurt, but is not the whole truth. This needs correction, but not attack. This is uncomfortable, but not catastrophic. This is a pattern, not proof of who I am. This is information, not a verdict. This is such a different inner world and all of that. And honestly, I think this is deeply spiritual too, because when I talk about right perception, I'm not only talking about psychological technique, I'm talking about a mind that is no longer being run by fear, where the loudest voice becomes the truest voice. I'm talking about a return to a clearer mind, a more loving mind, a wiser mind, a mind more connected to truth, to peace, to a higher self, to God, to greater consciousness, to whatever language a person uses for that deeper place. Because the fearful mind distorts, the egoic, the ego mind distorts, the defended mind distorts. The right perception is part of how a person comes back into alignment. That's why this matters in the zone too, because the zone is not available when condemnation is running the system. Flow is not available when everything is being judged, personalized, and tightened. Higher performance is not available when the mind is attacking what needs to be seen more cleanly. So many people want access to that deeper connected state, the zone, flow, higher self, spiritual alignment, being tuned in, tapped in, and turned on. But they keep trying to get there through fear and judgment. And that does not work because judgment is contracting, fear is contracting, self attack is contracting. The higher state opens through a different inner condition: clarity, trust, clean correction, better sight, less distortion, less ego interference, less false meaning. And that is why this week is not soft. It is powerful because right perception is not weak. It is stronger than judgment. Judgment, it is impulsive. Right perception is honest, right? Right perception has mastery. Judgment is reactive. Right perception has discernment. Judgment personalizes everything. Right perception can separate the event from the meaning. Judgment says, this is who you are. Perception says, this is what happened. Now let's respond wisely. That is strength. So, how do we work with this practically? I think the first step is catch the first interpretation. Most people do not even realize how fast meaning gets assigned. Something happens, and immediately the mind tells a story. So, the next time something happens, pause and ask, what actually happened? And what did I immediately make it mean? Because that is huge. Because those are often not the same thing. I missed a target. That happened. I always fall apart. That is the meaning I added. I ate off plan. That happened. I have no discipline. That is the meaning I added. I got nervous. That happened. I am weak. That is the meaning I added. We had conflict. That happened. I am unlovable. That is the meaning I added. That separation alone creates a lot of freedom. And second step, ask whether the voice is helping or harming you. Not, is it loud? Not, is it intense? Not, does it feel familiar? Is it helping? Is it creating clearer sight or is it creating more pain? Because many people are obeying a voice that is hurting them. And the third step, learn the difference between correction and condemnation. Correction sounds like, what is needed here? What can I learn? What would help? What is the next useful adjustment? How do I respond wisely? Condemnation sounds like, what is wrong with me? I always do this. I knew it. I'll never change. This proves it. Here we go again. So if the tone itself is personal, attacking, identity-based, and hopeless, that is not correction. And the fourth step, pay attention to the fruit. So again, this matters so much. If a way of seeing consistently makes you tighter, darker, more ashamed, more hopeless, more defensive, more disconnected from peace and truth, it is not helping you, no matter how honest it sounds. And the fifth step is practice a replacement perception, not fake positivity, not denial. Just a cleaner statement, something like, this is uncomfortable, but it is not a verdict. This is a mistake, not an identity. This needs attention, not attack. Fear is interpreting this quickly. I want to see this more clearly. Correction helps. Condemnation does not. And those statements matter because they begin retraining the mind towards right perception. I think one of the most compassionate truths in all of this is that many people have been suffering under interpretations they never thought to question. They thought, This is just how I am. This is just reality. This is just honesty. I'm a realist. This is just my personality. This is just what ambitious people do. This is just what happens when life is hard. But maybe not. Maybe what they have been calling truth is actually distortion, and maybe a huge amount of peace, healing, freedom, and better performance begins the moment they stop automatically trusting the harshest interpretation. And that's powerful because it means people are not nearly as trapped as they think. If the suffering is being magnified by perception, then changing perception matters. If the heaviness is being increased by false meaning, then false meaning can be questioned. If the mind has been trained into judgment, it can be retrained into clearer sight. If the person has been living from condemnation, they can learn correction instead. That is hope, not cheap hope, real hope. Because that means healing is not only about changing life on the outside, sometimes it's about learning to see differently on the inside. And when sight changes, so much changes. Stress changes, performance changes, relationships change, habits change, identity changes, peace changes, spiritual connection changes, because the person is no longer trapped inside the first fearful interpretation of everything. They become able to see again, really see. And that is why I think this week matters so much. So if I were to leave you with one thing today, it would be this. A lot of people are trying to heal, grow, and perform better through judgment, but judgment is not what heals. Right perception heals, clearer seeing heals, truth heals, correction heals, discernment heals. A mind that stops attacking and starts seeing more clearly, that is where so much real change occurs. Because once you stop turning everything into a verdict, you can really finally respond to it wisely, and that changes everything. So maybe the question this week is not, how do I judge this harder? Maybe it is, am I seeing this clearly? Or am I seeing it through fear? Because sometimes life does not get lighter the moment the circumstances changes. Sometimes life gets lighter the moment perception changes. That is where so much freedom begins. So if this speaks to you and you're ready to stop living under fear, pressure, and self-judgment and start retraining your mind at the root, go to dawngrant.com because I would love to help you.